As an agent, you will jump in and typically be met with a screen that looks like this in Jira. And this is sort of the For You page. Personally, I actually almost never look at this. I find it almost irrelevant to look at this particular page. I always navigate to the project that I'm going to be working out of. So I'll go over the project and the sidebar in a moment, but really I just head over to this little drop down, click it, and then I find what I need to in order to go to the project that I need. And if you can't find it in here, if you're brand new, maybe logged into Jira for the first time, there's a little view all projects button, and that'll take you to like a full list, comprehensive list of every single project that you have in your Jira environment. From here, you could go through and search, find. Oftentimes you'll be sent a link to the specific project that you need to access. And because this is a JSM specific training, if we want to find all the JSM type projects in Jira, we could click this little product drop down and search for Jira Service Management, check that box, and now all of our Jira Service Management projects pop up. This will make it a little bit easier to find the right one if you don't know which one that you're looking for. So I'll be using the IT operations project for the demo of this tutorial. And once you do find the right project and you're either looking at this screen or you're inside the project, always make sure you star it. The moment you start it, it just jumps right into your side panel. So I'll do security operations next. And you'll see that it actually gets added right here. And now anytime I open up the little projects tab, the most relevant things that I need that are useful for me are going to show up here immediately. So yeah, this is like the number one thing I would use when you're looking at projects. It's the most relevant thing because usually you're working out of 3, 4. I work out of maybe 5 or 6 total projects in my own Jira environment. So I just star all of those and they're super easy to see. I don't have to go digging through things later. And if I ever do need to find a new project, I just go to view all projects and search for it manually. So immediately do that. That's kind of step one when you jump in. That way, when you jump into Jira, then the next time you click the little drop down, find the project you need, you go here, you have everything at your fingertips without digging through more settings and menus. Okay, so the rest of these sidebars, I'm going to cover them really quick. So there's a recents, which will open like your projects, your different work items and tickets. If you wanted to see those, again, I actually don't use this almost ever. You could also see your starred, which once again, I actually almost never use this. You may find this a little bit more relevant if you're starring certain projects, filters, dashboards. You can use this to kind of see that all in one quick snapshot. I find that when I start to do this, it starts to get a little bit overwhelming, and I like them like ordered and structured in a specific way. So I'll just typically open a project and see my starred projects here. I'll typically go to filters or dashboards and see my starred filters and dashboards. So I pretty much don't use any of those options. Below that, we have our apps, and these are pretty common for any extensions or anything that your team has installed. Sometimes these are relevant to agents when they need to do specific things. So like Tempo, you might be able to go in and log and track time. You might have access to that. For the most part, these are used for like backend or Jira admin settings. So more often than not, you probably won't need to jump in here. And even like the planning time, tracking time, all that, it's done on the ticket itself. So you most of the time don't actually need to access these apps. And as I'm going through these, you could customize your own sidebar and like remove whatever you don't want. That way it's nice and clean. You could also reorganize and actually go through, list things whatever order you'd like to. I'll show you my preferred way to organize these because it makes it a little bit simpler. So I'll typically turn all these off. Unfortunately, you can't turn off the For You because that's sort of the home page, even though I never use it. But I typically like to see my apps, sometimes my roadmaps, depending on what type of Jira environment that I'm using. I will typically hide either roadmaps or plans. So I might use plans or roadmaps. They're very similar. And then we have projects, filters, dashboards. I'll turn off operations and teams. Those are like very specific to alerting, change management. And then teams are relevant for some organizations that use them. If you use them, great. Like you can go to your teams, check out the teams that you have here. If you're an agent, most of the time you won't actually need this. Teams are mostly handled on the work items, and this is sort of just a place to see who's a part of which team and see a little bit more information about it. So yeah, going back to my sidebar. Let me head all the way back. There we go. So I like to clean this up, keep it very simple for myself, and pretty much use only what's necessary. I'll cover filters and dashboards in a little bit because they get a little bit more specific to use cases that I like to use on a daily basis. But next, let's jump into our project. So once you have your project started and you know what you're working out of, once you open that up, you'll typically have a list of things on the left sidebar. Really, the most important one for you is going to be queues. Queues are going to show you exactly what you need to work on. And we'll dive into like a column management, sorting, the actual work item view in a moment, and how to work tickets. But this is going to be where you typically work out of. And same process here as before. Once you find a good relevant queue, make sure you star it. Just star the queue, have it available at your fingertips. Otherwise, you'll start searching through like a bunch of queues and a bunch more panels, and it takes several clicks every time you want to find the correct queue that you're in. Oftentimes, what I'll even do is I'll just bookmark this page directly. So I'll go through, bookmark this inside of my browser. I click on it, and boom, my most relevant queue with the most relevant project shows up right in front of me. I don't have to go dig through menus, dig through a bunch of different stuff. I click one button, immediately I am on the correct page that I need to be on to start working on my tickets right away. So the less time you kind of spend working through and like trying to find where you're working out of, the better. There's a lot of UX decisions that Jira and Atlassian have made that made it a little bit challenging to like find exactly what you need. But once you have it and you bookmark it, it makes it really easy. So the most prominent queues that I would tend to use are really these three. The first one being all open tickets. This gives you a snapshot of like everything that needs to be done. And there's a couple that are actually set up incorrectly here. And they're not filtered correctly. But for the most part, your admins should have done a good job of setting these up. And once something is resolved, it disappears, which means that anything in this queue is still outstanding, period. So it's something that is not done and needs to be addressed. And sometimes inside of these queues, you'll already have assignees. You'll already have people working these tickets in different statuses. But it gives you a really good idea of like the total amount of tickets that are still open that have not been completed yet. And in this case, we have 22, but it gives you a really good like bird's eye glance of like, okay, I have 200 tickets or I have 20 tickets. And you could see exactly who's working on what statuses they're in. This is also super helpful for like an admin or a manager to see this view, and at a very quick glance, you could see exactly what's going on. The next one is all my tickets. And this is phenomenal for anything that you're assigned to. And typically this is a dynamic queue. So if it's all my tickets, anyone who's logged in, so I'm logged in as me, I'm going to see all my tickets that are assigned to me. So I'll go through, pick up one more task, assign it to me. And what's great about this is that now when I look at my open tickets or all open tickets, I'll go through, find what needs to be worked on. The moment I assign it to myself, it shows up in my queue. So now I could revisit this queue anytime I need to work on my work items that are either open, that I'm assigned to, that are in progress, and I know exactly where to find them. And if something's in progress or outstanding and it's related to what I'm doing, it's immediately going to be in this queue. So your open tickets are like where you go to find what you need to work on. And these might be named something a little bit different, but every single queue should have something generally similar to this, like all open tickets or all unassigned tickets. And then once you start grabbing them, you should always have a queue for yourself to see everything that's related to you and you only. That way you know exactly what you're working on. And then there's one last queue that I like to suggest starring or having at a quick glance is your all completed or closed tickets. And this is great because you might have resolved something recently and maybe you need to go back, add a quick note because something else came up. Maybe you resolved something recently a couple days ago and you have a new ticket that showed up that's very similar, and you just want to jump back in there and see exactly what you did for that ticket. So having this all resolved queue just gives you the ability to go through, find everything that was done, jump in and reference that information for a little bit later. You can view your comments and everything else within that queue. The one other way I like to do this is by going to my filtered search. And most of the time, that's actually the approach that I would take because it's very difficult to go through this list and find exactly what you're looking for. Whereas if you go to the filter search, which you could get to by going to your filters on the left sidebar and then searching for all work items, or you could just open this queue up directly in a filtered view by clicking this little icon on the right. And what that does is it opens up this screen. And this screen is what Jira calls the filtered view, or like your all ticket view. And this brings in tickets in your Jira environment from everywhere, from every project that you have access to with every status. Like literally everything that you have in your Jira environment will be pulled into here. And what's really great about this view is that we can now filter down and get very, very specific on what we want to find. So right now we're looking at things that are unresolved, and some of these are incorrect. So if I wanted to find something in, like, let's say just the done statuses, I could go in and specify that. So now I'm looking at just done statuses. Now we have 127 tickets total. Let's say I want to pull in assignee is Mitch Davis. I'll go in, search for assignee, or sorry, I'll search for Mitch Davis. That's what I should be searching for. Now we're going to jump down to 114 tickets, and we can keep filtering down to find exactly what we need. Maybe something we've worked on in the past, maybe something relevant. And you could filter by any field in Jira. So any field you've ever set, any field you've ever used, you can filter. And if you don't see it at the top level here, you could go under the more filters and find it. You can see there's a total of 200, and I could search for something specific like updated date, and I could pull that in, and now I have an updated date that I could filter by. So any field you've ever set, any field you've ever used, you can use to filter in this view. We also have a JQL view, and what I personally like to do to learn JQL is to just set up a couple of basic filters as I did here, and then you switch to JQL, and it gives you the exact JQL formula that you've used. And this is a really great way to kind of get used to and understand how to use JQL. And JQL is really important because it gets you a lot finer and more granular results. So if, for example, I wanted to see things that are very specific, or instead of doing like, I want to see project ITO and resolution does not equal unresolved, I could switch this to an or. And that gives me an entirely different result than what I would have seen before. So there's a lot more powerful things that you could do in JQL. And this is not a JQL course, but you could look into, there's a lot of documentation about this that you can check out that'll give you a lot of really good context on how to use it. And you can see that if I made a change that's actually not supported in the basic view, it doesn't actually let me switch back. And that just means it's too complex of a query that I entered in that I cannot use anymore inside of the basic searcher. So if I go back and put an and once again, the basic search pops up. And the last thing that I want to show you here in the view is the keyword search. And for example, if I'm looking for test node, I could type that in, and now it pulls in and indexes based on keyword all the relevant things that I want to see. And you'll also see that it's pulling in some random stuff that I may not want. So you could actually use parentheses or not parentheses, you could use quotations. Oh, that kind of broke something. Let me go back to basic. So when you're doing this, there we go, back to basic. So you could actually put quotations on your text. So I'll type in test node once again, test node. It keeps switching for me. Let me try it in here inside of the JQL. Test node, and let's try to accept that. So that should give me the keyword based on exactly what I'm searching for based on that text. So instead of just taking each word, which it does when you don't quote them, it takes the full, or the phrases individually, the words individually. So anything that has a test or anything that has a node is automatically pulled in. If we put those quotations around it, and I don't know why it's switching to JQL, it usually doesn't do that. Might be a little bit of a bug in Jira. But once we do those quotations, it automatically pulls in only things that say test node in sequence. So just a little trick for you there, because oftentimes I see agents searching for something based on keyword or phrase, and they type in a few words and they get so many different results when they could just add a couple of quotations and you get a much finer and relevant results shown to you. So that's definitely one thing that I would do. And something that I look for, or something that I do very regularly, is just search for exactly what I need inside of this basic search inside of Jira. It gives me a very easy and simple way to find exactly what I'm looking for, especially if you have a ton of things coming in that you've resolved in the past that aren't showing up in your queues. So that's going to be your queues, and the 3 simple queues that I like to use inside of every Jira environment. You'll see that there's other options here on the sidebar. There's things like service requests, incidents, problems, and changes. This is really just your primary queues, but filtered down to each different issue type. And issue types are defined right here. Like if you hover over one of these or open one of them up, you have a little icon. This is like a service request. This red one is an incident, and I'll cover what they are and how they work a little bit later. But I pretty much never use these myself because I just like to see an overarching queue of all my incidents, all my problems, all my service requests in one place. There is a time and place for these if you wanted to see only those specific items. That being said, I just don't ever recommend using them because I'd rather just see all of my open tickets regardless of what kind of a request it is. So that's our queue management and how I typically like to set those up. We also have some reports in here. These may or may not be available to you, some of them depending on who you are and like if you have admin access. If you're an agent, you're probably not going to be looking at these. So I'm going to skip over these and save them for the part 3 of this series. And then we have a couple of other things. I'll cover the ones that are relevant and most important, one of which is knowledge base. Knowledge base is like your knowledge docs. And if you're familiar with Confluence, it's another Atlassian product that is very tightly integrated with Jira. And this is very similar to your typical knowledge base or knowledge setup that you'll have. And ththese articles most of the time, not only show up for you, but also for your customers. So inside of your portal, you'll typically see customers submitting these or viewing these knowledge-based articles so that they could self-help or self-resolve without needing to submit a ticket. So you could also see these and any of the private ones to you. You You could create articles, reference articles, really do anything here to link these and find like typical solutions. Then we have a customers tab, and this sometimes is used, sometimes is not. This is a lot more relevant for like customers and organizations that have external users using the portal and submitting requests. What I mean by external users is like if you're an IT team, you're probably not having any kind of external tickets coming in from organizations you work with. Let's say your customer support team, though, in that case, you might have like 10 different companies or 100 different companies that submit tickets to you as a support team that you resolve. So in those scenarios, you could see those organizations, you could see that list of customers and kind of see how many open requests they are. And this is still relevant for internal teams. I just find myself not using them very often, but you can like go into like each of these individual ones to see how many tickets and requests they have open under each user. And then below that, last thing I'm going to cover here is the channels. And this is really just our way of seeing what ways of submitting tickets we have. And right now we have an email set up, then we also have a portal, and then there's a widget and a chat option that are off. And there's a little channel access here as well, which just means that all customers are able to submit requests. So how do we actually create work items here, or how do customers create them, and how can we create them as well? So the first way that we have is the portal. We also have the email, which is automatic, and I'm sure all of you are familiar that you send an email, you get a new ticket. That's pretty common. I do want to cover the portal because that is a little bit more unique with Jira in some cases. So the portal will look a little bit something like this, and you typically have, let me pull up a more relevant one. You typically have something that is going to show you different groups and request types to submit. And when you click on one of those, you'll typically have a form that you need to submit for the request to go through. So the customer will go in here, typically fill out something like what problems are you having, add some more details, any more relevant information, and then they go through and send that request in. So these forms are typically built by admins in Jira and should have the most relevant information to you for you to be able to do your job. And they could go through and like submit, something specific to them, reporting broken hardware, asking a question, requesting a new laptop, etc. Depending on what you set up in your own environment, those are the options that you are going to have. So that's what that looks like. And if we're an agent, oh, I think I wasn't sharing my screen. It's going to look a little bit something like this, where you go through and set up the specific logic and forms and fields inside of Jira. They go through and fill these out depending on what requests that they have. And in some cases, I'll show you like that conditional logic. Depending on which fields I select, it's going to show and remove certain fields for them, making it a little bit easier to submit. So that's how customers go through and submit a request on the portal. For agents, you have two options. You could either use the same portal to submit a request. Oftentimes you might have like a walk-up, or you might have a Slack message or an email, or just a general thing that you need to create to make sure it's tracked inside of the system. So whenever you create those, you could either do it here in the portal just as a customer. The second option, though, is on the back end when we hit the create button at the top. And this process actually looks pretty similar, where you click on the request type, you select what you want to submit. So let me pull in something that might be relevant. Fix an account problem. You have the fields that are relevant showing up for you. And then once you have these fields showing up, you fill them out, same as the customer would, and you hit create. The one caveat here is that it doesn't work very well with forms, and it doesn't show you conditional logic here. So if your forms have a lot of conditional logic and you want very specific information submitted, I would tend to use the portal for that. But I would probably focus on structuring these and just showing the correct and relevant fields for an agent to submit these requests. And it's really as simple as hitting the request type dropdown, selecting what's most relevant to create, filling out the fields, and hitting create. So we've actually walked through that really quick. Also, I'll type in a summary. I need a new account for Michael Scott. So Michael Scott might be joining the company, and we need a new account created. We'll select a system, Active Directory, maybe HR services, and then any other relevant information. We hit create, and a work item is now created. And if we want to see it immediately, we could click this button here to view request a new account, which is what we just submitted. And that takes us immediately to the work item page. So before I cover this, I want to take a look at the queues view, because that's probably going to be what you're looking at most. And when these queues are set up by your admins, most of the time, if they're set up correctly, your most relevant things should be surfacing and floating to the top. And typically this would be based on your response time for like first resolution or time to resolution, so your SLAs. And typically the most relevant thing will be at the top for you. So when you jump into a queue like this, you'll probably just go through and like pick up the things that are at the very top. And as I went over earlier, we have like different request types and issue types, and those are structured in a very specific way in Jira. The issue types are like these little icons, and they specify the type of request that's being submitted. So really it boils down to a few, but for the most part, the most common ones you are going to see are request, incident, and then any others. Sometimes it'll be a task, sometimes change management, but it's really mostly incident and incident and service request. A service request is going to be anything that's like, I need something new, I need a new piece of software, I need access to this, I need building access. Like that's all requests. Incidents is something that occurred or happened. So incidents are typically going to be higher priority by default because it means something is down. So an incident could be my laptop is broken, I can't access something, my VPN is down, something that occurred or happened that caused a problem. That's going to be an incident. And again, just due to the nature of the way that these are submitted and the definitions of them, incidents tend to be higher priority because usually when someone's requesting something, they already didn't have access to it, and waiting a little bit longer probably won't hurt them very much. Whereas somebody had access to something and it went down and they cannot do their job potentially. So just due to the nature, typically those are going to be higher priority. And you can actually see these in the work type depending on what you hit. And it automatically changes based on the request type that you select. And request type are sort of subgroups or subcategories of service requests. So as I mentioned, like my laptop is broken, requesting a new account, things like that are defined and automatically associated with a service request. So if I pull in request a new account, it switches to service request because that is a service request. If I pull up emailed request, looks like that one also a service request. Fix an account problem. Let's see, one of these should show up as an incident. Let's see, escalate an issue maybe. There we go. So depending on what you select, and this is going to be preset by your admin, it's going to automatically select the work type. So I would tend not to worry about selecting that and making sure it's accurate. I would just go through and make sure that you're using the correct request type. So once you select that, you fill out your form, you're good to go. So those are the two definitions or like way of categorizing tasks in Jira. And when I actually open a request, you'll see that all of those fields and all of that information is stored within the request itself. So on the top left, you'll see the little icon that we saw earlier. You could hover over it. It'll tell you exactly what it is. In this case, it is an incident. And then we can take a look at the request type, which is stored on the right side. So this is a report, a system issue request type. And in the case that this was submitted incorrectly, we could go through and actually change this. So we could change this to escalate an issue. And if we can't find what we need here, that's usually because it's the wrong issue type. And for example, like escalate an issue and report a system issue are both incidents. But because we're under the incident umbrella, we actually can't switch these to a service request. So if something does come in incorrectly and we need to recategorize it, we check with the request type first. If it's not there, we click this little red icon and then change it to one of these. So in this case, it's going to be a service request. I will click on that. It'll take me through a really quick screen to make sure that I change it to the correct thing. We're going to leave it in the same project. Status mapping, we'll just make sure that open, waiting for support, those are the same, because you'll oftentimes have different workflows between them. We'll leave this field empty and we'll confirm the changes. And then our change officially goes through. And once we have this change, you could now click on the request type and we'll see the different list of options that are now associated with our service request. So we could go through and change them at this point. So this whole view here allows us to see the requests that were submitted from the customer, either via email, via a portal, whatever other method, maybe chat, is submitted by, and then we could see the summary, the very top right. That's the most important thing. That's the thing that we see in our queues. And below that, we see all the details that were submitted with and associated with that request. So description, environment, anything else that was submitted along with that. Let me hide this tempo because we're not going to go over that. That's just a plugin. And then on the top right, we have what are called our statuses. And when you start working on your Jira tickets, you start working through and setting a status. So once it's in progress, you set it to in progress. At some point, it goes into waiting for support, so on and so forth. And you just go through and change these statuses if you need to. Sometimes there are required fields when you switch statuses. And then eventually, when you're done working with something, you just set it to either canceled or resolved. Most of the time resolved unless it was canceled for some reason. And again, sometimes we have required fields. In this case, we have a resolution that we need to set. We can add a comment if we'd like, and we resolve this work item. Now that it's resolved, it's done, and it should disappear from our queues. In this case, the resolution was set, which means that the issue or the work item did disappear from the queues of all open or like all my work requests, and it'll immediately get moved to all the closed tickets. So a couple of things here that I wanted to cover as well is you have your context fields on the right side. So your SLAs, and then like things like assignee, request type, knowledge base, organizations. These are all more context and general fields that you can use to categorize, get more specific with your requests. This really helps with reporting later on as well. And if you want to change assignees from here, all you have to do is click on that. Same thing with the rest of these fields. The other most critical piece here is really your communication with the agents. And that all happens in this panel down here. And it really mostly happens through the comments. The others are really related to like what happens on the work item. So the history actually tells you what changes were made here and by who. So you can see that I changed this to work from in progress to resolve. It tells you who made this change and when. That way you actually have an audit log of it. And you also see customers making changes here as well. And then you have work logs, which is like tracking work. External shares an app. Feedback is any kind of feedback that you received for this. Approvals, associate approvals, if you have those as well. Really, for the most part, you're going to be looking at comments and history if you want to see like what happened to this ticket and who made those changes. Now, when it comes to comments, this is how you communicate with the customer. So something gets submitted, you have two options. You could add internal notes and you could reply to a customer. If I reply to a customer, this is going to go directly to them on the portal, but also send out an email notification. So I could say something like, hey, got it, I am working on it. And we'll send this out. And now the agent or the customer that submitted this knows that I've seen this request, I'm working on it, and it's currently in progress. We've made a notification to them to let them know that things are moving. So that's our first option. We reply to customer. Customers can reply to us by responding to the email or going to the portal. And we could keep having a flow of conversation here. If we need to request more information, if we have any questions, if they have any questions, they could drop those comments and emails, and everything shows up in this thread. Nothing is done outside of Jira, unless you're maybe doing it in person or like over Slack, in which case I would add those as internal notes or comments to add that context into here. So an internal note example might be like, I fixed the laptop or something in person on site. Here is what I did. And then you kind of list out, maybe the things that you worked on or the things that you've changed to fix that laptop. That way the team knows and you have enough context here to show exactly what you did and what resolved the problem. So you drop that internal note, and what this does is it just stores a note on the work item and does not notify the customer. That way you could have like internal conversations here, like I could add notes to my manager, to anyone else. Like if I want to tag Jennifer, say, hey, can you help with this? So everything is stored and associated in terms of activity, conversation, things that happen on this ticket and on this work item. And this makes it really easy to then later, once this is closed and resolved and you want to like reference this a year later, you could go in here and you see all the context stored in one place on one ticket rather than in a whole bunch of different places. So that's really how we go through and work through our work items. There's a couple of other features that are pretty useful here that I like to use myself. One of which is subtasks. These are really great for like maybe chunking out work a little bit more. And once I go through these, or like once I go through a ticket and think like maybe I need 3 different action steps to resolve something, I might create those as subtasks. So I'll test this out, test subtask 1, I'll create this. And now we have a new subtask that gets shown. And I could go through, and this is sort of like a mini Jira ticket, and I could actually resolve these as I go through and complete them. Oftentimes you might have these automatically generated depending on the request type. Like if you have an onboarding that shows up, you might have like a list of subtasks that needs to be completed. Now, the alternative to this is actually a checklist. And this is done in the form of an app typically. And in this case, I'm using Power Tools for Jira. It gives you a ton of really great features like checklists. And these are sort of like less formal and more like a one-click close. So I'll type in quick test checklist and add this over. We could also do the same thing where we just check it closed. We can mark it in progress, but it's sort of like a lightweight version of a subtask. And it's something that I like to use pretty often when a subtask feels like it's a little bit too much, because you could open up a subtask, you can have its own field, its own information, and sometimes it feels like a little bit too much. And sometimes what I like to do is actually add a subtask, and then because we can't add anything below a subtask, you could use checklists in here to also have like another subcategory inside of your subtask. So it gets a little inception-y where you have like your checklist in a subtask, and then you have your work item, and then your epics, and a lot of all that other cool stuff. So that's one thing that I really like to do here whenever I like to chunk out my work. The other thing is linking your work items. And this is super relevant for like if you have a duplicate, if you have something that's generally associated with another ticket in your project, or if you want to associate it with other projects and other tickets from other places. So all you do is click the link work item, and then you search for or find whatever you need to. You click it in here, and then you select the type of link that it is. So it could be an escalation, it could be a merged, it could be anything else. This list is very long. Usually it's not this long, but let's just say it's a clone. And then we add this link in, and it happens to create a two-way link between both tickets. So if I go into this ticket, you'll see that it creates a link back to my ITO project to this ticket both ways. And it gives the individual who's looking at the other ticket all the context of like where the resolution is, where the status is, who's assigned to it, and they could also jump into it and immediately get into this task here. So linking tickets is really great. It's also great for merging tickets. There's no native merging ticket out of the box with Jira, unfortunately. So that's one way to do it. You could do it manually. Power Tools for Jira also gives you the ability to merge work items, which is a pretty cool feature. So check that out if you're interested, because it does give you a little bit more functionality in Jira Service Management to be able to do certain things like merge, add checklists, even show like time and status tracking where you see exactly how long something's been open and in a particular task. Now, the one other thing that I will show here, because there's so many questions about like, how do we get a reminder? How do we reopen this at a certain time? The Power Tools for Jira also adds that. So it allows us to create a reminder and ping or reopen or tag someone in the comments and send a notification at a specific date and time. So there's a couple of preset options. So like if I want to do something in an hour, I could drop specific users that I wanted to tag, drop a specific message, and I could even add transitions. So something's open, I could reopen it, tag someone, remind myself later, do all that sorts of cool stuff. That's a big pain point in Jira because there's no like reminders features out of box. So that is available in Jira Power Tools. Okay, so that pretty much covers the full life cycle. And again, I'll do a quick recap. I would highly suggest you sort of clean up your sidebar, make it very easy and simple for you to navigate and find what you need quickly and easily. You want to star your projects in any relevant things like boards, filters, dashboards. And then you want to star your queues and then bookmark ideally a queue that you could jump into, find, and start working on immediately. So in this case, it would be like an all my open tickets or all open tickets queue. Anything at the top I need to jump on. So I might already be assigned to one. I jump in here. I start working through a ticket by putting it in progress, escalating it, whatever needs to be done, start communicating with the agent. And from there, I can close it out and wrap it up. Once it's closed, it gets removed from the queue, and I repeat that same process again as an agent, going through and resolving requests. Real quick, if you're having trouble implementing Jira and you want to work with a partner that's done it 100 times before and you're implementing Jira for the very first time and want to make sure you get it right, or migrating from another tool, or if you just want us to jump in and take a look at your current Atlassian environment to help give some suggestions on how you could be using it better, go ahead and book a strategy session with the first link down below. On that call, we'll go over your current Jira environment, and if it makes sense, we'll share exactly how we work with teams just like yours. See you there.